Wesley's historic questions were about what to teach, how to teach, and what to do. For the Connectional Table's emerging forum, we will seek to update these questions for our current moment. We will invite energetic conversation that will illumine our identity, which is tied to what and how we teach, our preferred actions, what we do, and our abiding hopes as we envision the future United Methodist Church. Today, I am joined by Derrick Scott, Executive Director of the Campus to City Wesley Foundation, a United Methodist multi-campus ministry in Jacksonville and St. Augustine, Florida, and surrounding areas. Derrick serves college students at the University of North Florida, Jacksonville University, Flagler College, and Edward Waters College. Good morning, Derrick.
Good morning, Kennetha. It's good to be with you.
Derrick, tell us a little bit about yourself and your ministry setting.
I am the Executive Director of Campus to City Wesley, CCW for short. We're a multi-campus ministry, very diverse group of college students that I get to lead and serve. Our hope is to have a presence on every physical campus in Northeast Florida. There's about 12 actually, but at the moment we're serving 3 and beginning our 4th at Edward Waters College. And it's an interesting ministry context. We do ministry specifically to the campuses that we serve, but with a big enough vision that it all is one organization, one campus ministry. And so specifically for individuals who are in leadership, they end up interfacing with students from young adults all across Northeast Florida. And so we have this beautiful community of college students who are on multiple campuses, if they are on campus at the moment, and we all do the work together. I get to work with an incredible team of young adults, folks on staff, and full-time and part-time. And so together we're really just trying to serve college students, make disciples on campus, transform the world, and we love what we get to do.
Wonderful, wonderful. In a recent devotional for college students, you wrote these words, and I'll quote you. You said, "When the waters of college are up to your neck, it is perfectly reasonable to wonder why life has to be hard. Rich, poor, privileged, oppressed, brilliant or not, we all have seasons where the raging waters of life just keep coming." I imagine a lot of us can relate to that statement, but tell us a little bit about what are some of the raging waters that students are facing these days.
The image came out of a psalm that I've been reading that day. One of the things that's interesting about collegiate ministry, particularly as I get older, is that I forget how big and dramatic sort of everyday struggles were when I first became an adult. So things like finances and budgeting, it's overwhelming. Now it's like, that's what you gotta do. That's just adulting. But so some of the raging waters is the things that adults just go through, but because these are emerging adults, it's the first time they've experienced this, first time they've had to make their own decisions, first time they've even had to deal with consequences of decisions on their own. That can be a huge point of anxiety for these young adults. We can look at that and say, you'll be okay. But I think it does require us to take them seriously. And so that's one of the things that I think could be sort of illustrated by the raging waters. I mean, right now they're having to navigate COVID, campus, they're having to navigate politics, and we're grateful that they are, in increasing numbers, Gen Z is engaging in the political conversation in our country, but we all know that's stress producing to be a part of that conversation. And so that and relationships, and I'll be honest, our families have a degree of brokenness that stay with these young adults, even if they leave home. So there's just a number of things that I see college-age young adults having to grapple with, having to deal with, work through, and I don't think they're unreasonable. I don't think it's just, young people and they need to get over it. I think that it's serious and it's important to name and to give them space to grieve it, the things they're going through, but also to work through them, to get stronger, to get bigger, to build capacity.
So you mentioned the coronavirus. You also mentioned the political atmosphere at the moment. How are the communities you're serving impacted by the twin pandemics of racism and COVID-19? And what has been the ministerial response to those impacts?
I'll address COVID first. I have students who are, on one hand, very, very given to science and will listen to science over rhetoric and personal opinion. And I have students who also are immunocompromised, or they're aware that there's an immunocompromised person in their families that they see regularly. I have students who deal with anxiety and depression in some pretty significant ways. And so this age of COVID has created a context that could have isolated most of our students that we serve. Many of them made a decision early on that they were not going to go do a lot of things because they were immunocompromised, or they needed to stay home because it was really impacting their mental health. Be afraid to go to the grocery store, and what if they caught something? And then the students would just look at the science. They would see cases going up. It's like, we can't act like this isn't a thing. Like, we can't just go about life like everything's normal. It's not normal. And so what our response to that had to be, we were already doing online ministry, but we had to really double down on our online ministry. And about 95% of what we do right now is online. And I'm so grateful that we've done that, because it has actually kept these students from being isolated. They are still in community. They are still connecting. We're still serving them. Though serving them now looks like FaceTime meetings and Zoom meetings and Facebook Live, virtual worship and things like that. And we do a little bit of in-person stuff, but it's outdoors, masked, socially distant. So it's obviously not the same. And so that's the way that we have been able to come alongside them in this particular moment of COVID. And I'm really grateful for that. As far as the second pandemic of racial tension in our country, I do tend to reach a group of students that have a degree of societal engagement and cultural engagement, social engagement. They are not interested in sitting on the sidelines and watching the world burn. They are people who are like, we want to be involved, we want to move towards solution, and we're going to call out evil as we see it. Some of them are more constructive than others, and that is the way that it is. But my students have been involved in Black Lives Matter protests, and they've made statements on social media, and they've donated to organizations. And one of the things that we want to do in CCW is make sure that we are a fully accessible, fully inclusive community and a ministry. And so they've asked some deep, deep questions about, are we just talking about Black Lives Matter? Are we just talking about inclusion? Are we actually doing the work of inclusion? And so I've been really heartened at their desire to make space for people who are differently abled, to make space for the LGBTQ community. They've even wanted to make sure they've made space for those with differing political views, specifically views that may not agree with things like Black Lives Matter. Because we do want to be fully inclusive. And I see all of that as a response to this uptick of racial tension in our country.
Well, in particular, I want you to think about the recent killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, which happened in Florida. What have these deaths meant to you personally, Derrick, to your students and to your ministry?
As a Black man in this country, it is hard to overstate how nervous I can become when I'm in certain parts of the city, how nervous I can become at rhetoric, how nervous I can become with certain types of leadership. And the last several months has been a re-education in the people around me who honor that, who say that that matters, that my feelings matter, and the people who either do not have room to say that, they don't know how to do that, they feel like they're betraying something by acknowledging and honoring my feelings, or they dismiss. And so for me personally, it has changed some relationships. The killings of these unarmed African Americans. And that's going to take some time to navigate. And I tend to be a very non-emotional person. So for me to get to a point where I am renegotiating relationships, it's significant for me. So that's what I would say for me personally. For my students in our campus ministry, it has just increased our sort of desire to be an inclusive space and a space where we talk about these things. And so we've created a group called How to Ally, where we're inviting our students to really consider what it means to be an ally to people of color, what it means to be an ally to LGBTQ individuals, what it means to be an ally to differently abled individuals, and getting beyond just slogans and Facebook posts, and really leaning into actual proactive engagement that centers the voices of those who've been marginalized. I don't know if it's so much changed how I do ministry. I do feel a bit of a mandate to make sure that I'm naming these societal ills, these societal sins, and inviting us to remember that, particularly as Wesleyan Christians, we are not people who pull in and only think about ourselves and our own salvation and our own well-being, but we are people who are descended from abolitionists and defenders of the poor and people who visited people in prison. That's our spiritual heritage, and that's what we need to keep moving forward. And so I do feel this sense, this need, this burden even, to name that, to say that, to mention that. And I try to mention those kinds of ideas of being people who pursue justice, not because it's a cool political slogan. We pursue justice because we serve a God of justice. God has decreed justice from God's throne, according to the Psalms. And so we must be people who live out and who embody and who, in many respects, demand justice of people who say that they are at the very least sympathetic to the voice of followers of Jesus. So in that respect, I guess it has added some layers to the things that I say out loud.
2020 will be remembered as a time of a very divisive U.S. election. Mm-hmm. We also have had seemingly intractable divisions in the church. How do we embrace differences and dissent as being as important as shared understandings and agreements?
Specifically as leaders, we've been nurtured in convergent cultures where our goal is to build consensus and to move everyone in a direction all on the same page. But that's just not the world we have now. That's not the world we're ministering in. It's not the generation that's coming through. It is divergent, and it is divergent in this sense. Even in a room full of people who see the world the same way, when you ask them how they see the world, it's all painted with different colors. And so now, even with people who see the world the same way, we have different goals, we have different desires, we have different grievances, and that all needs leadership. But you don't lead divergent cultures the way you lead convergent cultures. You have to find a way to move groups together in coalition, as opposed to coherence may be a good word there. But coalition, I think, is the leadership edge that we have to learn to live in and to lead in. And I see this as for pastors as well as I see it for political leaders. Gone are the days where everybody's going to be in agreement. So if we are making decisions based on everybody being in agreement, we're not going to get there. It's going to take forever. But if we can create enough space and create a big enough vision that allows people with differing perspectives and views to be at the table and to be a part of the direction, and we've got to learn how to lead in this. And if we could do that, I think, particularly in the church, I think we create something beautiful. I think we create something where our values are not necessarily based on agreement of specific points of theology, agreement of specific points of philosophy and political theory, but agreement around things like Jesus and agreement around the table being open, an agreement around the belief that Jesus wants to transform the world and he wants to do it through the church. And we're a part of that. And I know that there are people that will say that in order to do that, we must be on the same page theologically or politically. And I'm just going to say to you, I hear you. I just don't think that's the world we have. I don't think that's the church we have. We may have had it, but that's not the world we have now. And so our job as leaders is to learn how to lead in the world that we have and not keep hoping to get the old world back, which probably didn't exist, actually. It probably only existed in the sense that it silenced all of the divergent voices. But now in the age of social media, in an age where people can build a movement from their iPhone, we're gone are the days where we can count on a convergent culture.
But it begs the question about the unity of the church. On what do we base any sense of unity within the church?
I think we've got to base it on shared ministry. I think we've got to base it on super essentials. And so for me, that unity looks like gathering around the table of communion and believing that we've all been invited to the table, that we are in ministry together, ministry with Christ, and in ministry to all the world. Because of what God has done in Jesus, that has been given to us as a gift of the table. I see a lot of unity around the table, and I mourn that that's not enough for people. But I guess my personal sacramental theology is strong enough where I'm like, man, like when I think about the Last Supper, Jesus and the disciples, we are not talking about a group of people who all saw the world the same way. We're not talking about people who engaged ministry the same way. We're not even talking about people who talked to Jesus the same way. Like, we are talking about this diverse group of men and probably women at the same table receiving the broken body and shed blood of Christ. That's what brings them together. It's Jesus and what Jesus has done that brings them together. It's not their shared understanding of Jesus. It is not a shared theological construct. It really is that they've been invited to the table by Jesus. Peter is sitting next to John, and Judas is sitting next to Simon, and that these are, in my opinion, the things we can agree upon and unify around. I do at times wonder, being a layperson, is there something I'm missing when I say, hey, the table is enough for us to be unified? And some elder says that's not enough. It's like, well, maybe I'm missing something, but I'm holding out hope that there's a group of people that can gather around the table of the Lord, come and receive what only Jesus can give us, and leave to be on mission for the sake of Jesus and his love experienced in the world. That's enough for me.
Amen. Amen. Derrick, you kind of touched on some identity issues in terms of what it means to be the church and what it means to be United Methodist. So what preoccupations and passions do you think people would see and say are contemporary marks of United Methodists?
My students tell me that when they think about the United Methodist Church, they think about everybody being welcomed. They think about deep community affiliation. And I want to unpack that a little bit, that deep community affiliation. They look at me and my involvement in the UMC, and they're aware that I'm deeply connected to our district and the local churches here in our district. But then they know that I have deep connections within our conference. And so Florida is a very large conference in many ways. And so we go just west of Tallahassee, all the way down to the Florida Keys. And our students know that I have connections all across Florida based on the United Methodist Church. And then they're like, but you know people all in the Southeast as well, and you're in communication with them. And then people all over the country and all over the world, and you're Facebook messaging people who are on the ground in Africa and friends in Europe and all of this because of the United Methodist Church. And they're like, there are very few organizations that create that kind of network, that kind of close network of concern and care and accountability. And so for them, they see the United Methodist Church as, this, I'll use the word, connection, that it's got depth and it is not just for work and getting things done, but there's actual flesh on that. So that's one of the hallmarks, that connection, that network, that deep community that is global. And then my students understand that to be United Methodist means that we do not simply get to say, hey, I believe a thing, but we've got to go deep with that thing. We've got to read scripture and understand how scripture affirms or does not affirm that thing. We've got to think theologically, and then we've got to engage. It's got to be more than just words, but there actually has to be action connected to that. And I do think that these are incredible hallmarks that I currently experience in United Methodism, but I'm heartened again that my students see it and they appreciate it. And I had a student tell me the other day, Derrick, you keep going, you're going to convert me to United Methodism. And I was like, that's cool. It's like, this has been your plan all along. So, I mean, I don't talk about it. And you do the thing you feel like Jesus is telling you to do. But if I got to say, yeah, I want you to be a United Methodist. And I tell you, Kennetha, they are not mad. They are not mad at all. And so, those are the things that I think, those are hallmarks, those are attributes of our church that at least the young adults in my sphere of influence are picking up and experiencing.
What do we need as we think about the future of the church? What do we need to learn or do differently in order to sustain vital, relevant, and effective ministry?
I think we've got to get back on the ground and get out of our offices, get out of our pews. Sunday morning should be the time where we get what we need so we can go out. And I think that the activity needs to be more Monday through Saturday of how we are advancing the mission of Jesus, how we are helping people experience Jesus' love, how we are telling the story of what God has done in Jesus and inviting people into it. That's got to increase. The vigor has got to return, the passion to invite people to the table because the Holy Spirit is pursuing every single person on the planet. We've got to get back to that passion. And in some ways, it does require very specific people, I think, being involved in the business side of the church. I love the business side of the church, but I think we're too preoccupied with it. And some of that preoccupation, I think, is that maybe there are too many people involved in it. And that's a lot to unpack, but I don't. So I do think that we need strong foundation to do ministry, but I think the encouragement needs to be getting people out into the world, getting people out into the field. So the encouragement, the compelling vision needs to go back to individuals on the ground, go back to asking the question, what do people who are hard of hearing really need from the church? And then people going there, centering their needs and desires and their hopes and concerns. And somebody in a room somewhere working on the finances to make that happen. But we don't all need to be doing that. We need to free people up to be involved in ministry again, on the ground where the people are. And this is what I experienced in campus ministry. My privilege as a campus minister is that my job really is to be where the students are. My job is not to be in an office somewhere, cooped up, waiting for students to come to me. My job is to go to where the students are. When I talk to my clergy friends, they want to do that kind of ministry as well, but they feel like they have to stay in the office. And man, whatever we can do to get the clergy out of the office and whatever we can do to get the laity out of the pews and on the ground, walking in on Sunday with our hands dirty because we've been out there in the world doing the work. Whatever we can do to make that happen, I think leads us into a hopeful future.
What a wonderful vision of the church. So let me push you a little bit. And you mentioned the business side of things. What are the priorities that must guide what we stop doing, what we start doing, and what we continue doing in the next year or so? And I really want you to start with, what do we stop doing?
I think that there is a sense that everybody's got to see the church the same way. I think we've got to stop that. I think we've got to stop trying to legislate agreement. I think we've got to stop using the institutional functions of the church to make people do things or go in a certain direction. So that's one of the things I think we've got to stop. I think we've wasted a lot of energy trying to get people on the same page. Now, with that said, that also means that we have to create some freedom. We've got to allow people to be on their journey. And I know that this is hard if all you want is a convergent, homogenous church. But again, I don't think that's the world we live in, and I don't think that's the church we have. So I think we've got to stop trying to create that church. That's just not the church that we've been given. I also think that we've got to stop, and in some ways COVID has accelerated this. We've got to stop thinking that everything needs to be by the book. And I'm not talking about policies to keep people safe. I'm not talking about GAP, which is General Accepted Accounting Practices. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about ministry. I'm talking about the way that we serve people. We don't have to do the same things we did last calendar year. We don't have to continue to approach certain things like small groups the same way. We can actually rethink them. We need to stop thinking that Sunday morning is the best time for worship. And I don't want to call it tradition because I'm not trying to dismiss where we've come from. But where we've come from are people who said, you know what? Only doing ministry inside the Anglican church isn't working. Somebody needs to stand on a grave in the middle of a city and preach the gospel. That's the energy that we want to adopt, which means that we have to stop limiting ourselves to what's always been.
So great. What do we start doing and what do we continue doing in the next year?
Yeah. I think we start receiving each other. I think that's one piece, that we really started receiving each other as a connection, a holy connection, and not receiving each other as in camps and positions. I think we do have to start receiving each other. That's work for everybody to do. And some of that is going to be the inner work of removing bias, the inner work of dealing with ways of how we lead and how we interact with people. I do think we've got to start receiving each other. And I think that means taking people's fears seriously about being received and doing what we need to do to alleviate those fears. When someone's afraid to talk in church, that's a problem for us. When someone's afraid to say what they think in a group of Wesleyan Christians, that is a problem for us. And so what we want to start doing is getting to those relational issues, because I do believe that in a divergent culture, everything rises and falls on relationship. not on winning and losing, and not even on influence. Everything rises and falls on relationship. So I think we've got to start investing in relationships more and doing what we need to do to make sure that part of our value system is the connection. That's one thing I want to invite us to start doing. I want to invite us to start releasing people to really try new things in ministry, to endorse new ideas around ministry. We've got in Florida, as well as the other conferences, the Fresh Expressions movement, which honestly has some ideas that I'm like, really? But here's the deal. We will never know how God is moving in a space until we get in there. We will never know what God's doing with people who are in their kayaks on the St. Johns River until we start dropping in there. We will, and I can tell you this personally, you will not know what God's doing in the craft beer scene here in Jacksonville until you get in it, until you step into that space. And so we've got to free people up to do new kinds of ministry and new ways for new people. That's one thing we've got to start doing, and we've got to be okay when things don't happen the way they've always happened. And I think we've got to start rethinking what our metrics are. And again, this is where I am not so much concerned about how many people are in a congregation on Sunday. I'm really concerned with how many people get pastoral care quickly. How many people know that there is a person in the church that's a little further along on their spiritual journey that they could reach out to, and within a couple of days, they get some connection. They get someone praying for them and listening to them and listening to their story and counting it as sacred. That's the stuff I'm interested in. I'm not so much interested in how many small groups you've got. I'm interested in how many people, particularly lay people, are discerning their call, the reason why God put them on the planet, and they are saying, yep, this is the call I've been given. And like Paul says to Timothy, it is my job to stir up my gift and to be faithful with this thing that I've been entrusted. Those are the things that I want to see us lean into when it comes to metrics. How many people are in a room? I mean, in the age of COVID, that's a bad metric anyway. But even before, it probably wasn't a great metric either. It probably gave us a story that wasn't really true. And I think all of this really comes down to the ways that United Methodism may need to go back to a more in-person, and please don't hear me say in-person as a knock to social distancing and quarantine. We ain't there yet, but we need to go back to this in-person, one-on-one, direct pastoral understanding where people with pastoral leadership know their people by name and know where they are. And that may mean that we need more people in pastoral leadership than less. But I think that those are things that we should start doing.
So what would college students, the college students that you serve, say is essential for the future ministry of the church? What would your students say is essential as you think about the future?
Got to learn how to be open to all people. We got to learn how to become less spiritual judges and more like spiritual friends on the journey. We've got to learn how to invite people into discipleship and not guilt people when they're not ready. And we've got to learn how to integrate our theological positions with our public witness. Those are things that our students would say, my students would say, we've got to do for the future of the church.
Tell me about the last one, given where we are as here in the U.S. as a country.
Yeah. I think we have a good number of Christians that are rightly so afraid of politics, afraid to talk about politics. We've been told two things you don't bring up in a crowd, religion and politics. So one, we don't know how to talk about our faith, but we then also don't know how to talk about how our faith informs the way we live in this world and the things that we would agree and disagree on. And I think that one of the reasons is that we have missed the mark in some respects with integrating our public witness, our witness in the public square as it relates to government, civic service, as it relates to elected officials, as it relates to politics and policy. And here's what I noticed. I noticed that there are these pockets of individuals, who do that. They tend to be in specific parts of our church ideologically, or they tend to be individuals who went to very specific seminaries and took classes. And I'll tell you who misses those groups: the laity, the people in the pews. And so the result is we either have folks who are told this is how to think, this is how to vote, or people who are told something closer to, well, we're just not going to talk about that. We're going to focus on Jesus. We're going to focus on loving each other. And I get it. But I think we need to invite our church, and I mean our church, into deeper conversations of how our faith, our particular accent as Wesleyan Christians, and our theology invites us to engage the issues of this world. There will obviously be some people who will say, no thanks, I'm good. But I want to believe that Wesleyan Christians, again, are not folks who shrink back, but folks who engage. And I think that part of that engagement needs to be a deepening of how our faith, our theology, our understanding of Scripture intersect with the world that we live in. And I do think that we need more, not less, conversation around that, and more, not less, friendly debate, more, not less, nuance. I was really looking forward to putting the proposed social principles in front of my students. I went and got a bunch of copies of the proposed social principles leading up to General Conference, because I wanted my students to read these ideas and to wrestle with them and to ask questions and to disagree and to want more. I wanted that because I deeply, deeply believe that as Wesleyan Christians, we are called to be engaged in the world. That requires a social theology that comes alongside our personal and collective theology. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Derrick. Is there anything else that I have not asked that you would want to say?
I love the church. I love the United Methodist Church. And I have loved being in a church that is theologically diverse, because I think it offers the world something beautiful and unique. But it's hard. And I just want to say that, yes, I am in this for the hard work. I love this church that much that I'm willing to do the hard work to see us remain a diverse denomination that gathers around the table of Jesus, that empowers all people to be in ministry together and to the world. And I mourn that there are people who would rather not be a part of that kind of church. But I get it. And if you can't be a part of that kind of church, all good. But man, I am here for the hard work of creating a diverse church that is a beautiful, beautiful picture to the world of how people who do not see the world the same way can gather around the same table, celebrate the same God, and go leave that table in shared mission that looks different in different places. But we all know that it's about making sure that every single person in this world experiences the love of Jesus. So that's what I hope people know about me. I'm here for the hard work.
Thank you, Derrick. This has been a wonderful opportunity to have a conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kennetha. It's been great to be with you.